Happy World Radio Day. My name is Matt Rappolt, and you are listening to the very first broadcast of Midtown Bookshelf. I'm here today in the KPL's Hefner Studios with Allison Dyjach and Serena McDiarmid, and we are going to share some conversations and some stories all today on the theme of radio and the theme of diversity. So welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So before we get into the stories, and we're each going to share a story from our life about diversity that we find important, before we get into that, can you talk a little bit about yourselves and say how you came to be here in Kitchener and tell the audience a little bit about who you are?
All right. Hi, I'm Serena. I've lived here in KW for about a decade now. I moved here to study health studies at the University of Waterloo. And I ended up at Teachers College, Bachelor of Education, did some teaching, and then went back to school to study child development. So right now I teach part-time in the Waterloo School Board. I study child development at the University of Waterloo. And then I'm also on maternity leave right now and brought a baby along with me to our recording today. So little Pascal here is looking forward to hearing some of these picture book stories that we've got.
That's super exciting. I'm not sure if there's ever been a baby this young in the Hefner Studios right now. This could be a first.
Mm-hmm. Probably not. She's just about 3 months now.
And she's remarkably quiet now.
Yeah, don't jinx it.
Who knows? We could have her voice on the radio too. That'd be awesome. Allison, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Allison, and I grew up in the area and went away to Guelph for university and then Kingston for Teachers College, but ended up back in Kitchener just last year. So I am a teacher as well. I'm a supply teacher at the moment for the Waterloo Region District School Board. And I'm also a musician, so I'm in the band I the Mountain along with our host Matt. You might hear us on Midtown Radio sometimes, but I really love picture books, and I love that part of teaching. It's a really fun part of teaching elementary students, especially getting to read picture books almost every day. So super excited to be here today.
Yeah, and so I'm also a teacher. We have 3 teachers here, and it makes sense, therefore, that we're going to be sharing some of our favorite picture books, because not only are we all teachers, but we're all primary teachers. And so picture books are a huge part of our teacher's toolkit, to use a teacher's college word, that we bring into the classroom every day. So it seemed like a good idea for us on this radio day, and especially since we're celebrating diversity, to bring in some of our favorite picture books that celebrate diversity, because that is such a huge part of our teaching experience. So on the subject of picture books, can you maybe talk about what is maybe a favorite picture book you have? Because this is Midtown Bookshelf, and we are all about books. Mm-hmm. So what's a favorite picture book that you remember from your childhood? Is there one that stands out as being, your favorite kids book when you were a child?
I always really liked Gillian Jigs by Phoebe Gilman. That was a book that my mom read really, really often to me. We had a few in the series, Gillian Jigs and Her Wonderful Pigs. And my mom would always sing the song with me, and we actually made the pigs that she makes in the picture book. It's like a little craft, and you can make them. So that was always a really memorable one for me. Like, she was just like such a imaginative and creative child in the books, and I really liked crafts growing up, so I found I identified with Gillian Jigs quite a lot. That was a really big one for me. Still pretty memorable.
Phoebe Gilman is absolutely one of my favorite authors, and I think, is she Canadian?
I think so, yeah.
I'm not sure, actually.
She has the Balloon Tree. She has...
I love the Balloon Tree as well.
Something from Nothing, I think, is also Phoebe Gilman as well.
Oh, that's a classic.
Serena, do you have a favorite children's book from when you were growing up?
Yeah, you asked me this before. It's hard to put my finger on one, but I think Dr. Seuss was a great author. That sort of rhythm and the rhyming in all of his books is so great. And then the way he's able to weave in some of these bigger messages. I think now as a teacher, one of my favorite Dr. Seuss books would be Oh, the Places You'll Go. Whenever I'm having to leave a class, like if I've done a placement with a class and I'm moving on to another one, I always like to close off with Oh, the Places You'll Go, and just leave that that kind of inspirational message with the kids. I just love that book.
That's a great book. And actually, in the last school that I was teaching at, they had "Oh, the Places You'll Go" written up on the library in big text on the library wall. It was really cool. I think my favorite book that I would have as a kid, of course, like you said, there's a whole bunch of them, Serena. But I think my favorite's actually also Phoebe Gilman, Grandma and the Pirates. I'm not sure if you've ever read that book. Or ever
it rings a bell.
So it's about Grandma and a little girl who were kidnapped by pirates. They smell the noodles that Grandma puts on the window, and they're attracted by the smell, and they end up kidnapping the pirates along with the parrot. And it is hilarious. It's like classic Phoebe Gilman. Like the rhyme is there, the cadence is there, and it's just such a funny book. It's really enjoyable. So I think I really like that one. But Dr. Seuss is definitely up on my list. I'm trying to think. There's one that I really enjoy. It wasn't one from when I was a kid, but one that I really enjoy now, called, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name of it.
Well, while you think of it, I'm just going to jump in. I have a little Phoebe Gilman factoid for you here. So I just looked it up. She was born in the Bronx in New York. She later lived in Europe and Israel, and then settled in Canada. So I think there's a lot of different countries that could kind of lay claim to Phoebe Gilman.
Wow.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah, so and I think I've definitely seen her, like the little Canadian flag in the in our public school libraries.
Definitely.
At schools. The book I think is called Sam and Dave Dig a Hole.
Oh, yeah.
I was trying to think of what the names were, but I think it's Sam and Dave Dig a Hole. And my favorite part of the book is because it's like it's super simple. I think it's illustrated by John Clausen.
It
I
is,
think.
yeah, definitely.
And I'm a big fan of his books, and it's very simple. They're just digging this hole, and then they keep digging down, and they just about find the treasure because they're after this buried treasure, and they just about find it. And then in the end, there's this interesting switch. Like there's like little diamonds, and they just keep missing it. The diamonds get bigger and bigger as the page goes on. They just keep missing them. They go around them. They go on either side of them, but they never actually quite find it. And then on the last page, spoiler alert, just in case, turn it off now if you're going to read this book. It is a great book. They dig a hole all the way into like oblivion, and then they fall from the sky back to their house. And it's like the kids' reactions when you read that part of it. It's just like their mind is totally blown. Like, what? How has this happened? And then some of the colors have been shifted. So like the tree in their front yard was an apple tree. Now it's a pear tree. And it's always like, it's just sort of like there's this like element of going into a different dimension. And I just love seeing the expression on the kids' faces when I read that. So that's one of my favorite books.
I'm glad we're at the library. I'm going to go check that out after this.
It's a great one. There's so many here at the library. And actually, two of the ones we're going to share about here are also from Kitchener Public Library. So
yeah, mine is as well.
Yeah.
Great. So if people are listening here in KW, all the books that we're going to be sharing about today are actually available at the KPL. And so what we're going to do now is we've each brought in a selection on the topic of diversity, a children's book, a picture book, and we're going to talk a little bit about it, and then we're going to share either certain sections of the book, or we're going to read maybe the whole thing if it's a shorter one, and then have a conversation about why this book is important or special and how it relates to the topic of diversity. So Allison, you have an interesting book over there, and I know that book is is co-written by someone who's from this area, Robert Munsch. What can you tell us about your book?
Yeah, so the book that I brought today is called From Far Away. So it's written by Robert Munsch and Saoussan Askar. So this story actually came from Saoussan. When she was a child, she wrote to Robert Munsch about her story of her childhood, and he was just really inspired by the story. So he actually he turned it into a picture book with her. So it's about a girl who her family is forced to move away when her country is going through a war, and so they come to Canada, and it's kind of just her figuring out life in Canada, having to go to school and navigate that. And I think it's a really important book to share with children, because it's something that we're seeing like so often now, especially in Kitchener-Waterloo. There's so much diversity in the area. There's been so many refugee families that have been moving here, and this book just really shows like an authentic like an authentic side to the story because it's told from the point of view of Saoussan. So I think it's just a great book to share with children for them to kind of see, what that different perspective is like, moving to a new place where you don't know the culture, you don't know the language, and just what that would feel like.
Great. And you're going to read the whole book or just a selection?
Yeah. It's not too long, so I thought I'd share the whole book today.
Perfect.
So this is From Far Away by Robert Munsch and Saoussan Askar. And you can't see the art, but the art in this version is by Rebecca Green.
And I will say the art is actually lovely, so if you have a chance to come and check it out, or if you want to come take a look at the book, it's really beautiful art.
So on the first page, Saoussan is holding a letter, and it says, "Dear Reading Buddy, my name is Saoussan. I am 7 years old, and I am in grade 2 now. I came from far away. The place we used to live was very nice, but then a war started. There's no food, my father said. We are getting shot at, my mother said. Bombs made holes in the wall. One day, a really big boom made our roof fall in. We have to leave, my father and mother said. My father left first and was gone for a long time. Then a letter came with plane tickets to a new country. I didn't like the plane. It made me sick. Nobody wanted to sit near me. In the new country, my father took me to school and left me there. He said, 'Be good and listen to your teacher.' I listened to my teacher, only I didn't know what she was saying because she did not talk right. Other kids tried to talk to me, but I was not able to answer. I didn't speak English. I had a buddy who showed me the school and played with me at recess, but she didn't understand when I tried to teach her a rock game I knew from back home. At first, I didn't know how to say, 'I want to go to the washroom,' so I crawled out the door when the teacher wasn't looking. When I came back, I waited outside the door until someone opened it. Then I crawled back to my desk. Once, I crawled to the washroom and saw a paper skeleton in the hallway. Only I did not know what it was. I thought the skeleton was evil. I thought that people were going to start shooting each other here. I screamed a very good scream. Everybody came running. They thought someone was being killed in the bathroom. My teacher tried to tell me that the skeleton wasn't real. It was made of paper and was going to be used in the school play. I didn't understand. She jumped up and down and danced around to explain that the play was just for fun. But I thought the skeleton made her crazy, and I screamed louder. My teacher hugged me, just like my mother would. I didn't know how to say, 'I'm so scared,' but the big tear that went out of my eye said it for me. I decided that the whole school was crazy, and I did not want to stay there. But my father said I had to. He said that people here are not going to start shooting each other. I had bad dreams about skeletons for a long time after that. But finally, I began to talk, little by little. I learned enough English to make friends, and school started to be fun. Now I am in grade 2, and I am the best reader and speller in the class. I read and write a lot of stories. The teacher is now complaining that I'm never quiet. So far, my favorite part of grade 2 is the trip our class took to the zoo. We got to see the pandas and monkeys and eat pizza, and nobody shot at us the whole time. I decided that my new country is a nice place. I changed my name from Saoussan to Susan, but my mother told me to change it back. My teacher moved from our school. I saw her in the mall once and ran to her and hugged her. She was my first teacher in this country, and she helped me a lot. Where are you from, reading buddy? The end.
Oh, that was a nice one.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a great book. So when you were reading that one, there was one line that really stuck out to me. And that line was when she lets out a really good scream. Like, I really like that, the way that they characterize that. Instead of like a loud scream or a terrified scream, I like that they used that word good in there. And I mean, that's something that stuck out with me. It seems like that was where she really needed to let out that emotion, and screaming was the only good way that she could know how to do that. So I really liked that part of it. That was a really great book.
I noticed that too, that description. And for me, I was thinking, she let out a really good scream, like this scream was a positive, a good thing. It made me think about how probably for her growing up, there was situations where she was needing to scream like that. This was an adaptive and like a good, important thing for her to do, to scream to stay safe. So it kind of impacted me, like hearing that word good to describe a scream made me think about that as well.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of turned into like a defense mechanism, that like that is what she had to do to stay safe. Yeah.
And I think you can't see it as well just from the reading, but I think in the story, that's when she also goes to her teacher and she gives the teacher a big hug. And I think that, that shows that a lot of good can come out of a scream like that. That's when she really starts to make a connection with her new culture. And that scream is sort of the catalyst that makes her feel like, you know what? I'm so frustrated right now. And sometimes you have to get that frustrated and you have to hit that wall in order to break through it a little bit. So.
Yeah, and I think it was just after that she talks about how she doesn't know how to say that she's sad, but her tear says it for her. And I like that idea, like that, even though we have these language barriers between us, there are all these universals in communication. We all know what a scream means. We all know what a tear means.
Yeah, and also the fact that so much good can come out of negative emotions. Like, we often think of crying or screaming as being negative emotions that don't have necessarily a positive impact. But for people who can't communicate, those universal expressions of emotions can be the best way that they can communicate. It's a way of showing others, even if you don't understand the language, we can still see how you're feeling. We can still understand that, and we can make that emotional connection that way. Allison, I'm wondering, have you ever used that book in a classroom, or how do you think that book could be used in a classroom?
I haven't. No, this is a newer one for me. But I think this book would be great. For example, if maybe a class was getting a new student that they knew was coming from a country that had experienced war, it may be a good book just to kind of let students see a different perspective. I would be wary of like not wanting to just generalize the experience of like coming to a new country. Like, I wouldn't want the students to then assume that their new classmate has experienced that. But I think it could be a really good way to like open up their eyes to like that really authentic point of view of what it's like to come to a new country. I think it would also just be an interesting read to share just about like what life is like, in different parts of the world, and how that can kind of affect our views on the world. Like in grade 2, students learn about like global communities and learning about around the world. And I think this would be a really neat way to teach students kind of that there are some really serious things going on in the world, but in kind of a, not lighthearted way, but this book kind of, it talks about the war, and I do like actually that it uses the word like that there's a lot of shooting going on, or there's no shooting here. Like, I feel like it's an important thing for students to understand, that like that is something that happens in other countries, that they're like, that's
sugarcoating it.
Yeah, like that's like a threat that happens, and like for that to be on the girl Saoussan's mind all the time, like, oh, someone's going to pull out a gun, or there's going to be shooting at the school. Like, I think that is an interesting thing for students to kind of think about. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that also, in terms of building empathy as well. In classrooms, a lot of times students, and it doesn't just go for students, but also, older people can assume that the people around them all have very similar experiences. And, students might not know that, even if someone comes from a different place. They might think it's a very similar experience, whereas the book is showing that, there's not everywhere is going to be like this. There's other places in the world that have different histories and have different threats or different experiences. And when people come to a classroom, there's sometimes very different experiences that come along with that as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So there's this idea that books can sort of be windows or they can be mirrors. And I think for a lot of the students in our classroom, this book that you've shared from Far Away, that will be a window for them into a different sort of life. And I wanted to share a book that I brought, which I think for the same students might act as more a mirror. It's sort of about those same sorts of issues, but from the point of view of being in Canada. Sorry if you can hear any fussing in the background. We have a baby on board here.
No, I think that's great. I think Callie's reacting a little bit to the book, maybe.
So I don't know, maybe should I get into sharing mine, or did you want to?
Sure.
Yeah.
Let me just say that we're also, just remind the listeners that they're listening to Midtown Bookshelf, broadcasting out of KPL Studios in downtown Kitchener, at the Hefner Studios at KPL, Kitchener Public Library here in downtown Kitchener. My name is Matt Rappolt, and I'm here with Allison Dyjach and Serena McDiarmid. And this is World Radio Day, so we're sharing some of our favorite children's books that relate to the World Radio theme of diversity. So Serena, you brought in a book, and I've never actually heard of this book before. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, this book is called Come With Me. It's a bit newer. It was published in 2017 by Holly M. McGhee. She actually is a literary agent and owns her own publishing company. She started out at HarperCollins and then started her own publishing house, and has had a number of very successful books, this being one of them. So this book by Holly McGhee, it is illustrated by Pascal LeMaître, sort of like sparse illustrations, but that are very powerful. So I would definitely recommend come on out to the library. You can take this book out and take a look at the illustrations yourselves. So at the front of this book, there's a note from Holly and Pascal. It says, "Come With Me" is written in honor of friendship, bravery, and the fact that we aren't powerless, no matter how small and insignificant we may feel. And then they have a quotation as well from Refugees International that says, "Though at the level of the individual, our actions are as light as a cloud, united they can change the color of the sky." So the book starts, it says, "All over the world, the news told and retold of anger and hatred, people against people. And the little girl was frightened by everything she heard and saw and felt. She asked her papa if there was something she could do to make the world a better place. Her papa said, 'Come with me.' Hand in hand, they walked out the door to the subway. Waiting there on the platform, her papa tipped his hat to those he met. So the little girl did too. They rode the train through the tunnels underground. The girl and her papa were brave and kind, and that day they won a tiny battle over fear for themselves and for the people of the world. The news kept telling of anger and hatred, and the little girl asked her mama what she could do to make the world a better place. Her mama said, 'Come with me.' And I don't want to take away all the mystery of the book, so I'll leave it there for a little bit. I'll just tell you about that. The girl, when she's on the subway ride with her father, you don't hear this in the text, but within the illustrations, you can see that there's a number of, there's a very diverse crowd on the subway. There's people wearing hijabs and turbans and just people of all walks of life there. And then when she goes out with her mom, it's similar, where she's just meeting all sorts of different people and meeting them sort of with this open heart. And then ultimately she ends up going out on her own, and she makes a friend along the way. And the friend says, "Where are you going?" And the little girl says, "Come with me, because two people together are stronger than one." So I'm going to pick up just at the very end of this book. The girl, the boy, and the dog were happy to be out. One step at a time, they understood what they could do to make the world a better place. They could go on. Brave, gentle, strong, and kind to one another and all living things. As tiny as it was, their part mattered to the world. Your part matters too. Come with me. And that is the end.
That's lovely.
Wow.
Great story.
That's beautiful. Wow. Really, really nice.
So, Serena, tell me a little bit about why that story really resonates with you a lot. Why do you think that's so powerful?
I think similar to Allison, I also think a lot about the kids that I'm encountering in the classroom when I'm choosing books. And she mentioned that we have a lot of new Canadians joining us from some of these war-torn places. And a book like hers is able to give the other students in the classroom a look into what those kids may have experienced and might help represent their story for them. At the same time, the kids in the classroom are often hearing about these things on the news, and that experiencing a lot of like turmoil over that, like, about hearing like there's fear and there's misinformation and things like that. So when I read this book, it really resonated for me because I thought this is something that pretty much every child is going to experience at some time. They're hearing about hatred and they're hearing about war and they're hearing about just prejudice on the news and in different media. So I wanted to share a story that sort of gives them some power and tells them that there is something that they can do. And it doesn't have to be something big, like that quote at the beginning, which I just absolutely love this idea of, even all the clouds united can change the color of the sky. Like putting that out there for kids and saying, just going out and living your life with kindness and with love is enough to change things. And if we all do that, it changes the whole world.
That's great. I mean, I can really make that connection back to what you said about the mirror, right? I mean, Allison's book, From Far Away, is showing us about another experience. This is maybe turning that mirror around or turning that window a bit more towards back on themselves so they can maybe think about their own place in this and how they can impact change.
Yeah, I think a lot of kids in our community would read this and see themselves in this little girl's experience.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Have you used that book in a classroom yet?
No, I haven't. And I was so glad to get the invitation to come on this program because it led me to read some new books, and this was one of them.
Great. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, my book, the one I chose, is one that I actually also, again, I recently discovered this book. And I really wanted to do something because February is Black History Month. Mm-hmm. And I previously taught at a school that was not necessarily super diverse. And so I really wanted to make a point. I mean, when I was at the school, I tried to make a point of including diverse perspectives in there because it can be sometimes difficult if you don't have a diverse class or a diverse population in your class. It can be sometimes, you can sometimes very easily slip into complacency and just sort of present books that have the same sort of perspective. And so when I was thinking about what book I wanted to bring in for diversity, I wanted to do something about Black History Month or something about that. So the book I chose was Boonoonous Hair. And it's a great book by Olive Senior and illustrations by Laura James. And the illustrations in this book are phenomenal. They are just so vibrant and just so energetic. And what really drew me to the book was the word Boonoonous. When I asked for a book about diversity at KPL, the library attendant recommended this, and I just burst out laughing. I said, I might not be able to say it to get through this on the radio without laughing because it's such a great, it's such an interesting word that I've never heard of before. And so I looked it up because originally I thought that it was actually the girl's name, like it was Boonoonous Hair. But when I looked it up, it's actually so Boonoonous is Jamaican patois for wonderful or happiness, and it's used as an exclamation. So it must be spoken rapidly in order to be effective and energetic. This is according to UrbanDictionary.com. So I'm going to do my best to say it with excitement and with energy through the reading. But I just love this book. It's great, and it's about a girl named Jamila, and she's not super happy with her hair. And she wishes that her hair would be more like the other girls in her class who have maybe straight hair or blonde hair. And so at the beginning, we find Jamila at home with her mom, and Jamila has hidden the comb because she doesn't want to get her hair plaited. So we'll pick up the story there. Time to plait Jamila's hair, but the comb has vanished into thin air. "It's up in the ceiling," Jamila shouts. The elephant's hiding it in its trunk. Oh, really? Last time it was the camel's hump, the kangaroo's pouch, the toucan's beak, the mouse's squeak. Now, missy, no more playing. Spin around and let's get braiding. Aha! Look where the comb's been hiding. Wah! Jamila cries. Oh, come now, Jamila. This is no time to pout. You'll be late for school unless I comb it out. Close your eyes, count to 10. I'll be done with this plait by then. I hate my hair. It hurts. It's a pain. Oh, do stop making such a fuss. Why do you hate your hair so much? Because it's bad, bad, bad. It makes me so mad, mad, mad. Why can't I have good hair like the girls in my class? Sasha, Sarah, Brittany, Claire. Oh, really? What's so good about their hair? They have hair that's long and soft and pretty. It glows as it flows without plaits, without pins, long or short. It can swish as they wish. Oh, Jamila, you silly, why want their hair when the most fantabulous, splendiferous, Boonoonous hair in the world is right here? Really? And truly, you'll see, your hair is electric, kinetic, and free, while your friend's hair always looks the same. You have hair that can frame your face or whiz off into the stratosphere. Hair that can say something different every day of the week, every month of the year. Want to try? Oh, yes. A different head of hair every day of the year? Well, let's start this week, so I can have puffs on Monday, plaits on Tuesday, and here in the book, we see the artwork. She's going all different places around town with different hair. So here she's in the art gallery. Braids on Wednesday. I think she's in the library, this one. Cornrows on Thursday. Twist out Friday. Yes, and on Saturday, hair can be wild. But on Sunday, you must be grandmother's child at Sunday dinner. But guess what? No more hiding the comb, no more crying. Agree? Uh-huh. Boonoonous, Boonoonous, and Boonoonous you. For the first day of school, here's your new do. Now promise, Jamila, no more hiding the comb, no getting in a tizzy. Sometimes Mom might be busy, so ask big sister Lizzie. 'Cause she's been there? With her electric, kinetic, bombastic, fantastic, twirly, whirly, curly, fuzzy, snappy, nappy, wavy, crazy, Boonoonous hair. And that's the end.
Very nice.
That was great. I loved your dramatic reenactment too.
It's hard sometimes, like, especially if you're used to children's books that have a certain rhyme, like a certain cadence or a certain rhythm. It's hard sometimes when they have a different rhythm. That's definitely not a rhythm that I'm accustomed to. So a couple stumbles in there, but it's okay. I really love the story of that book.
Yeah.
And the artwork just shines, in my opinion. It's just a really fantastic book that I would love to bring into the class. And again, just to give them a perspective, because I mean, so often students, they don't necessarily they haven't built the empathy to understand how a different student might be feeling about something that can seem so normal, right? I mean, some students might just take their hair for granted. They don't think too much about it, and they might not think that for another student of a different background or of a different identity, then that might be a really huge deal for them.
Yeah.
That they might be bringing that baggage in the classroom.
And for those students to also have themselves represented, for students who feel that about their hair, to also have themselves represented that way is important. I appreciated how you chose a book by a Jamaican author. I thought that was great to have more of those voices in on our broadcast here and also into the classroom.
Of course.
Is so important because we have to acknowledge we are talking about diversity. We ourselves are not the most diverse group necessarily, so it's great to have some authors who can contribute some new perspectives for us here too.
And I think that's what I mean about sometimes getting a little bit, complacent if you're in a situation where hi, Callie. If you're in a situation where, you're in a classroom where you have a lot of books that are maybe, that they've just been there for a long time and you're not adding or reevaluating the stacks that you have or the books that you have. Sometimes they can just be only presenting a particular perspective. And I know coming from my experience, coming from the classroom that I was at into this new board, from a small town into a larger city. And now I'm teaching schools that have so many different identities and students of so many different countries and backgrounds and cultures. So it's really important for me to be thinking about how can I make sure that they are reflected in my teaching and in the classroom that they're in. And I mean, when it came to choosing a book for this, I wanted to make sure that we had some different perspectives that were being framed. And also I want to say that very exciting. I was watching the Oscars last night, and there was the short film of the year is actually a story quite similar to Boonoonous hair. That short film or short animated film won the Oscar for best short animated film.
That was Hair Love.
Hair Love, yeah. So that's
I
really
haven't
cool.
seen it yet, but it had great praise. So
yeah, and if it's anything,
to watch.
if it's anything like the story here, I think it would be a great fit for inside the classroom.
One thing that I really like about that one and some other books that have been coming out in the past couple of years is that it's taking something like really small, but kind of like just making people realize that is an issue and that is something that comes up a lot, when it's coming to like teasing in the classroom or like racism. Like it's not always like a big issue. It can be something small. I know in classes that I've taught in before, I've had kids that are teasing each other for really simple little things like, oh, the food that you brought in your lunch today, or like, your name, like I don't know how to pronounce your name. Or like your hair looks different than mine. I like that we're having a lot of picture books now that are like taking those things and like making kids realize that, diversity isn't just like what country you came from or like the color of your skin. It's like a lot of things like your family traditions and the food that you eat and like the clothes that you wear. Like it's all of these little things that the more that we can address it with students is really important. One of my favorite books, it was one that I was also thinking of bringing today. It's called Sandwich Swap, and it's about kids that they have different lunches that day. One girl has her like white bread sandwich and one girl has her like hummus and pita, and the kids are all teasing the girl for her hummus and pita, and they end up deciding to swap and try the other ones and realize that it's not that different. And that's something that I experienced as a teacher a few years ago in a classroom that I was in. There were kids in my class that they felt the need to, make comments about some of the lunches that kids were bringing. And it's such a small thing, but that can really like hurt someone, especially it was a grade 1 class, but, because their food was different, they thought that they felt the need to make fun of it. So I'm liking that a lot of these picture books are taking really small things, but teaching kids like the value of diversity in kind of everyday concepts.
And that's so important because it also brings it down to a kid's level as well, right? I mean, it breaks this really big concept like racism down into something that kids can identify with. I mean, every student knows what it's like to, be made fun of for their name or their appearance or something like that. But to have something like your hair, which is so intrinsically linked to your identity, I mean, I think kids can really understand that. They can understand how that can be such a core part of it, and it can really help them understand that really complex idea of racism or discrimination. It breaks it into a little bit more digestible bites for kids.
I think it's a good way to teach also about privilege, to help kids understand that when you don't have to worry about being made fun of for your lunch or when you don't have to worry about being made fun of for your hair. Like that in itself is privilege, and helping kids understand that and identify it in their lives is also an important teaching point. So it's great that we have books like this to help with that lesson as well.
I mean, we brought in 3 really great books, and I really want to encourage anybody who's living. I mean, even if you're listening to us on the other side of the world, chances are you have access to YouTube or something online where you could go check these books out. These are fantastic books, and always make sure to go into your local public library and take a look at the children's books that they have there, because there's some phenomenal books out there. And these are clearly 3 great ones that you could use in your classroom, or you can share with a child, or even just read it for yourself.
Yeah.
No shame in that.
I love reading picture books, honestly. Like I just enjoy the message that comes with them, and even if it's just for myself, it's fun to indulge a little bit sometimes.
It takes great talent to put these big ideas and big important messages and distill them down into something that's resonates with kids and will keep a kid's attention. So I think that that means they're going to be good for adults too.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've actually reached the end of our first episode of Midtown Bookshelf. I want to thank you so much for coming in and sharing your selections with me. I think this is a great beginning of our literary journey, I guess, on this radio program. And I hope that everyone listening to us, whether you're here in KW, whether you are in Ontario, whether you're in Canada, whether you're in Jamaica, whether you are anywhere in the world, that you've enjoyed our program. Thank you so much. Any last words?
Well, thanks for listening. If you have any recommendations for us, where can they send them?
They can send them to the Midtown Radio, either Twitter or Midtown Radio email, and then Midtown Radio will pass it on. David will pass it on to us, I'm sure.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Great. Happy World Radio Day, everybody. This is Matt Rappolt signing off from Hefner Studios in Kitchener Public Library, downtown Kitchener. Have a great day. And keep reading.